Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu. I'm coming to you from a sunny but cool, breezy afternoon here in Accra. And my guest is coming to us from across the continent, which I'm excited to have this conversation about where he's from and where he's local and all the good stuff that we always talk about on the podcast. So let us get to his bio. He is a multipotentialite. I've never heard that, and I love that word, multipotentialite creative thinker, offering off-the-shelf business growth consultancy services. And as a visionary strategist, he helps businesses with the right intuitive and informative strategies that guarantee transformational growth. Farhan Guled, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Florence. It is an honor to be in this broadcast, and I would like to greet all global citizens, whether it is evening or afternoon or morning or midday or midnight, all over the world. My name is Farhan Guled. If I go straight into where I'm local, it would be a little bit confusing. You know, some of us who had cross-country times where we lived in different countries or grew up, or we have heritage of different countries, it kind of, gets blurred. Yes.
So let's get right to the official question. So where are you from? Where are you local? And what is your craft?
Yes, I'm from Kenya. And right now I live in Uganda, where we have a startup that is now addressing in financial deepening and holistically working on promotion of Islamic finance in the SME and medium SME sector. Mostly we focus on sustainable projects, green sustainable projects on the low level, and agricultural initiatives that have promise. As I said, we are very new still. We got licensed last year. So now we are on the setup side of putting things together and integrating the teams that we acquired, the legacy teams and protocols, and trying to get off the ground very soon.
Okay. And so what would you, I kind of alluded to it in your bio, but what would you say is your craft?
My craft is still, I'm a man still learning himself. But if I would say is I'm good with people. I'm a people person, so I can spot possibilities for connection, possibilities for connection and partnership. I can see who can do what with who. So mostly, I think I would say my main one is coming up with that needs to be done, and also clearly being able to say who can actually do it with fast interaction intuition most of the time. And sometimes, there's a margin of error sometimes, but mostly it is really what it is. Like if I say Florence can help in this and this, it usually turns out the way I said most of the time. So I think that is one thing I have. And I also have an intuitive brain where if I query a solution for a certain problem, I don't know how it works, but it works its own magic. And that query can be on for months sometimes, but I don't know, subconsciously. And everything, whether I'm interacting with a soldier somewhere, or I'm interacting with a gate man somewhere, or I'm interacting with a domestic worker, or I'm interacting with shop owner, somehow that conscious is also collecting clues. And usually when I'm ideating, it helps me to reflect on those unlikely interactions that you may not actually be thinking of looking at innovative solution from, but it gives you a very good highlight of the problem when you are interacting with the grassroots. So majorly just a stroll in the market can actually give me more insights than any other desk work can give me. So I don't know, I'm still struggling with the timings of certain crafts.
I love that. I love that, as it means that you have facility in many different types of ways of doing business and ways of being. And so I want to talk a little bit more about your origin story, so to speak. So you mentioned you're from Kenya and now you are based in Uganda. And I feel like you have some global travels that have interceded in between then. So tell us about your Kenya, and it's kind of a little bit of the why, the where. So how did you come to be living, working, and playing where you currently are in the context of your Kenya self and now your Uganda self?
Thank you very much, Florence. Actually, it's a very touching question and personal to me, actually, because I believe in the stories that they say that life is a journey. And sometimes we actually don't know. We actually don't know why things happen. But somehow, in the beginning, you don't know. But after some years, you realize there was a wisdom to it. So my early years, we struggle a little bit, when we were young. I come from a very humble beginning. I come from a village life, and after high school, universities were too expensive and too stringent. So that's when I got to know about Uganda. I noticed a lot of Kenyans were coming here for studies because back then the offerings in the country was very few. We did not have a lot of private universities that were offering different kind of, and the public universities were limited because everyone is going there, and then they try to, out of 800,000 students, maybe 100,000 gets placement to the real universities that are under the public domain, University of Nairobi and all that. So I said, okay, let me just play it safe and explore a new country. And also, it was giving me, to be, of course, on my own in a country. That experience I wanted. And when I came here for my studies, that is like almost 17 years ago. And at that time, we came with this Kenyan pride, I don't know if you consider in the Twitter, for us in the East, we see ourselves as the South Africa of the East. So there's a bit of pride and all that. So we came with all that nonsense. And I was a young guy, so I did not appreciate it very well. But then when I left and I went back to Kenya, and then I finished my master's from University of Nairobi, and then I left and traveled around the world and went to Europe and worked with multinationals in Europe and traveled across different countries in Asia, in Europe, in Southeast Asia, all this. I came to notice, like, I gathered a lot. And then somehow fate used to bring me back every 3 years. I have an assignment for 1 week, 2 weeks, Uganda. I didn't know why. But then after three times of in between 3 years, my employer, a company I now work for, the owners of Salaam Bank, Uganda, is a Salaam African Bank in Djibouti. They're like, okay, we know that you have a very good network of people and connections with Uganda. Would you be able to help us establish an entity there? And that's when I came, and in the first I started. So when I came, I started with a bang of appreciating the country. Like I could live here, I could stay here, I could build myself here. Strongly, and it's because of my preferences actually that I got to know late in my life. I love mountains, I love trees, and I love the water. So they have both, all those three. It's not easy to have all those three in one city. Yeah. So, and it has this feel of always views. When you're mountain, and they have this really very good red roofings. I don't know if it is government implemented or it's just a choice, but it makes the city like green, red, and water. That's all you see. So, and it's actually very beautiful. So that's why I came here, and I believe this is actually a very good place to have the foundation of what can actually change this part of the continent.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard wonderful things about Uganda. And you said Kampala, right? You are in Kampala, the biggest city.
Yes, but actually there are many other cities that are way better than Kampala. Better from serenity wise, like Jinja. There's another place, a wonder place that I actually recommend to everyone to see once in their lifetime. It's called Fort Bottle. When you are there, the whole of Western Uganda actually, when you are there, you don't feel like you're in Africa. If you go all the way to the border of Congo, there's a city called Kabale. And in Kabale, actually, when it's winter, you feel like you're somewhere in the Alps. Mountain, it's ice,
Wow.
it's cold. And seriously, the Rondori Mountains are just around there. If you're a hiker, it's the best place to hike. People are so friendly. And, if you're looking for genuity in African culture, you go to places that had very less colonial influence. I don't know how the history went, but it feels like the West was a little bit saved. And in the West, people are still very much, they have that, you feel that, those community values. For example, in Fort Poto, they give you a name. It's like called your animal name or nickname sort of, and it actually translates in your personality. So if you are friendly, they tell you a name like a Kiki or Arale. If you are like someone who actually cares a lot, selfless person, If you're generous, they have a name for you. So everyone has one, and it's out of respect. They call it mbako, yeah, in the Batoto language. So I've seen a lot of magic that side, and one of the reasons I loved this country and the nature it has and the resources it has. And actually, I think, it's underrated. Like there are certain countries that, of course, due to the colonial influences and the perceived importance back in the days, like in Kenya, that get a lot of the media coverage and all that. Or like in Rwanda, where they actually invested a lot in sponsoring football teams and all that, yeah. But here, they haven't done a lot of country PR and invested a lot of country PR. And most of the things that people hear from here are only the controversial things, So it reduced people to understand what Uganda is all about. But I think it is a safe, green, and unexploited, and most of the things are very conscious that they have a culture that actually has a very deep connection with nature.
So I get that sense that East Africa and to some extent Southern Africa are so much more in tune with the nature because they have so much of it, right? And the development pace is much different than in the West, where we have a relationship with nature, but I'll be honest, I feel like here in Ghana, we definitely could care less for the most part about preserving trees, about, keeping our water clean and all of those things. So I very much can appreciate the mindset that you come with and understanding it and appreciating it from where you are. So between moving from Kenya to Uganda, you have done some other types of exposure, particularly in terms of deciding what kind of craft and what your vocation was going to be. So tell us a little bit more about your experience traveling outside to, I guess, hone your skills as a finance professional and as a social impact professional.
To start with, the story started, in the beginning, your priorities are always different. Let's just be very honest, yeah? When you are hungry, you want to eat. And when you eat, you want like, okay, what else can I eat? Or maybe, pizza night now. Let's just do pizza, But it doesn't start with let's just do pizza, It starts with, oh my God, I'm hungry, I want to eat, So my journey was like that, back in the university, before I started my degree in business, finance and banking, I was told, like when I was younger, by the teachers and in my high schools and all that I was good with science, physics, biology and all that. And they're like, okay. And I was somebody who could actually keep his cool whenever anything that could actually make someone faint happens and stuff. So they're like, okay, well, you could consider actually becoming a doctor and stuff. And I'm like, okay, hell yeah, okay, that's cool, yeah, I'll do it. Then, unfortunately, when I was to start, it was a little bit of the fees and all that, and it was too risky. The fees I had at that time to start could cover a whole year in an art school or one semester that I'm not sure of. And if you have that stress of fees and you fail, you get out. I'm like, okay, let me just do something I can handle. At least I do 1 year and then I see where it goes. But thank God I finished the university in the time that it was supposed to finish. And still, that time, it's not about looking for craft or what am I good at. In Africa, we don't do that, actually. It just comes later in life. You first have to cover your immediate need. You first have to feed yourself. And even the decisions we actually make to go to a university in Africa, most of it, people don't get career counseling early in life. We don't know, actually. We just say, okay, what can get me employed? We just need employment, It's just that bad around. And when that happened, I went back to Kenya. Immediately, the day I finished my exams, my mom got cancer. So I had to stay with mom for a whole year. And that gap year, I was still scouting out, but and then I decided to start masters, University of Nairobi, finished it up. But the masters thing was like more or less like, okay, I'm just recovering from this loss. Let me just do it as I wait and weigh my options. Then somehow I got a lead and I got employed by the same employer I work for right now. I started off as a controller, and then early in my career, I was practicing fully finance, typical finance manager role. Then I moved to South Sudan for another establishment, and it is then when I actually said, okay, I was that time 24, 25. I was expecting my first born daughter. And that's when I actually thought of like, okay, where's life going? And that's when I started questioning things, here and there. And after 2 years at my role in Sudan, I said, okay, I'm not actually either making the crazy money I need to make for my kids or learning. Career always, it gets to a point whereby you feel a bit suffocated and all that. I felt those things, and I kept looking and applying things here. And I got an opportunity to move to Germany with a German company called Merck Pharmaceuticals,
Well known.
based in a small city called Darmstadt, the near of Frankfurt. So the program is called Africa Compt. It's a program that actually is supposed to build bridges, but I think still been revamped to see how well it can build bridges, to my understanding. But it gave me actually the basis of a lot of the things that actually led to my now. It gave me actually access to people who don't limit you to what you studied or what your degree says, or okay, but you did finance and banking, you do something related and all that, but just look at what are the key things you have, and then they spot it out and they put you in places where you can actually add more value. So I started off in the finance and controlling function of Merck head office. Gladly, around 1,500 finance professionals who are working there in different departments.
Wow.
There was only one Cameroonian consultant who was working with a service provider who was there, and me. We were the only two black people in that floor, and that also taught me a lot. And it's not that being global doesn't actually stop me being Pan-African. So because when you have only one person from Cameroon and he spoke more French than English, and he spoke a lot of Dutch. So sometimes we speak Dutch, sometimes we speak our broken English, but somehow the brotherhood, that feel of like when you're around them, it just feels different. Kind of, it kept us together. Like we automatically became very close friends. And the teams there, I started in controlling, and we did a bit of consolidation, group accounts, a lot of different legacies and all that for group reporting. We were the teams that were preparing those quarterly reports that you see CFOs stand and talk to Bloomberg and all that. Yeah, we were the behind the team, and after that, I got a bit of treasury things on my hands as well. And I was spotted by a very wonderful gentleman called Fritz Saha, who was a strategist in the company, up high, but he loved Africa. He had a very good connection with Africa, lived in Mozambique, and those Portuguese-speaking African country. For 20 years, he hunted in Africa, got deployed as a military in Africa. He had a very good, strong connection with Africa. So we got to meet a bit, and then we got deeply connected. We kind of, sometimes the connection is not something you force; it just happens. And he started, getting involved in my life, whether I ask it or not. He's the one involved. He's doing things without me knowing, and so I got introduced to internal audit. So when I got into the internal audit team, now, and I was always happy whenever I'm posted somewhere. I don't say no. For me, the process was like, okay, learn as much as you can. And the best way you can learn is variety. You need variety. You need, like, if you're in 1 year in one role, the next year you're in another role or something like this. You learn the bits. I wanted to learn the bits as fast as possible. And internal audit, it was a general kind of audit. It wasn't financial audits. Financial audit was done by another company, but internally we did the operational audits, bit of operational audit. So you could be sent to a very technical function to audit, or you could be sent to a country you've never been, or you could be sent to, and it was a bit amazing. It was too much stress, but it was amazing. You learn too much. You get too much. You have to read. When they tell you you're going to clinical trials and you know nothing about clinical trials, you have to read about clinical trials first, and then you go to the standards of what you audit, the standard bits. But you have to understand what you're auditing. If you don't know clinical trials, you can't actually fit. Even some questions, are not relevant in certain things, So that actually gave me every month a new assignment to understand, either a country or a function. So I ended up getting a lot on procurement and sourcing. Function, the head office function, and somehow they were very stubborn guys, and every time like when you're doing the exit meeting, they used to very much refuse us to accept either the rating or the finding. Yeah.
Wow.
Somehow I had a very soft way of getting it through them. So my lead team said, okay, I think this guy can, and there were some supply issues that time. China was trying to get ready for Olympics and all that, and they started closing down a lot of the material industries or slowed down. So that actually brought a lot of supply issues. And that time, the company was actually looking for sourcing different materials and seeking for strategic suppliers all over the world. Also, new regulations in the world came up where certain materials cannot be airlifted, if they are more than 1 gram and all that. So a lot of challenges were there. So the guys I used to audit came to my boss and said, listen, we need your guy for the very reserved. And sometimes when you are like doing supply sourcing, you need to not because you're seeking for something. You need to be like more charming. You need to look for different people. You need to talk to different people. So they saw that as something that I can add to the team, and they also saw a bit of luck. I remember there was this wonderful one who used to term me rainmaker. Sometimes when I bring one material that had issues in the company, So I enjoyed my time there as well and learned a lot because I actually did not study supply chain and procurement, but on that experience, on what I was doing and with the team, I learned a great deal of detail on how that very important function works. So when after that, I questioned, I said to myself, okay, number one, I want the trees and the mountains and the lakes that are countless. And also I want to be in a place whereby I can just knock any door and say, hey, can I use the toilet, please? And people open and I go in and use. My preference for Africa was more than actually living in Europe, for example. I'm a bit more social person. I like to be of help and all that. So I said to myself, okay, you are now approaching your 30s, and whatever you're building here will help you at some point. But now it's time to go home. And also, I saw how hard it is to raise a family in Germany. So problem was I had to travel. That time I was traveling every 3 months, back and forth, and it wasn't fair for the kids. And I said to myself, I need to be closer to them and at least do something where I am really local, which is actually to me East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, and countries that I have a very strong relationship with. So I said, let me just stay at least in that side of the continent. I did not want to limit myself in one country. I wanted to say, okay, all these countries are actually part of you somehow. Try to do something and assist people in these countries and figure out that. So that is how I came up here. And Uganda also gave me more clarity. Of course, these are the years of growth, and I think people actually grow when they're heated up. The same way that the gold melts when heated and takes shape, and that's when you grow and melt and take shape. I think that is very true.
Yeah.
And I think you have to have a conviction in life. You have to have something you stand for, or otherwise you will just be plainly plain, and it is neither very helpful nor useful to anyone to do that. So that purposeful, driven, conscious is one thing that actually drives me. It doesn't allow me to stay around if I feel like the contributions I need to be made are not being committed to, or if I feel like the values I hold are actually not considered. At some point, I can hold my breath for 1 year, 2 years, but at some point I know this is okay. I usually don't quit very quickly. That is what I actually stand for. Yeah.
Okay. You're a bit of a shapeshifter, I can tell, but looking at the flow of your movements between the different departments and et cetera. And so speaking of shape or sound, I want to ask you about Glocal Speak. So you've just come from Germany. You've decided that your home is the East between Uganda, Kenya, and South Sudan. And so the question is, we want to hear what you hear. So can you share a word, a phrase, or a saying that is a meaningful part of your local experience and how or why you've come to value it as Glocal Speak?
Actually, one thing I would say, and that actually always resonates with me, is the quote. I don't know who said it, or I don't know if it is something that is in my mind, but it's from one, we are one. From one, we are one. Which actually just simply sums up that the concept of interconnectivity and how everything that happens around us somehow definitely affects us in the immediate course. And I think, as Glocal, I see it, if it's happening in Palestine or in some place that I've never heard of, in Laos or whatever, it doesn't mean that it has nothing to do with me. It really does. It's just that it will take longer time for me to feel, but within a generation, these things move very fast. Something starts somewhere and you don't pay attention and it just grows, and within 20, 30 years, it's a continent and then it's global. Very quick. And these days, it's even actually faster. A lot of things are very faster. Examples of that were shown. So I believe that I say from one, we are one.
Okay, that is universal, and we are. There's that singularity that I think is the science proves out that it's a universal concept, that we are definitely one as well. So Farhan, I want to start to talk a little bit more about what you're doing now. So let's go to 101. What is Islamic banking or Islamic finance?
Florence, I think when we start with the prefix word Islamic, it kind of turns off a lot of audiences. But Islamic finance is finance the way you know it, with a little bit of a tweak that prohibit or taking advantage of someone or delay buying things, holding goods and keeping them for when the demand is high to make a killing. It's the social aspect of business. And if you ask me from an investor's point of view, I'd rather do conventional because that's where the money is. That's where I can actually make a more killing, and that's where the risk is also even lower. But the social system mandates it has a bit of overlap in many cases. Of course, ESG is way bigger, and Islamic banking is still very potential. Islamic finance is a very potential subject that is still growing over the world. And just to understand, to make it very clear, also, it has nothing to do with religion.
Yes.
Countries like Britain are trying to actually be a hub for this. It's seen as one of the tools that can be used to eradicate poverty. It's seen as one of the tools that can be used to bring sanity into the world that we are in. Into the world where, for example, some fellas are reporting $100 million net profits in a market that 40% of the people are living below $2. So when you look at it, it's just when you say below $2, now someone wants to be the one that's taking those $2 every day, and that is what this neo-capitalist systems actually tell us. It's not about enhancing people's economic stand, but it's more or less like about how can I get those $2 off his pocket, or maybe how can I get at least 50 cents of those $2 as charges. Give him a platform to run on, just charge. It's not about like, okay, where the economy is bleeding, let's just be a bit conscious. But this one is about more like consciousness, yeah?
Yeah.
And also, for example, like you can't just liquidate the only hospital in the village or the only milk processor in the village if there's a problem and you have given a facility. There's a certain way of continuity is always what is being advocated for here. The main features that actually differentiate it from conventional banking is the prohibition of interest. So now when I say prohibition of interest, you might be thinking of how can a bank make money without interest? Instead of interest, what they do is, in the Islamic principles, they believe money is just only a medium of exchange. It cannot be an asset, per se. And what happens is, for example, you as a Florence, you need a vehicle. So what happens is I buy the vehicle, I own it now, and I tell you, okay, this vehicle, I bought it at this much. This is the principle. And you give me at a profit of 14%, and you pay it this much. Everything is clear. From day one, everything is known. Whereas if you went to a conventional bank, for example, that is called murabaha, that is like asset financing. Whereas if you went to the conventional banking side, what happens is a lot of things are not very clear to start with. Of course, the principal and the interest are clear, but the compounding aspect of it is almost the same. What is not very clear is there are penalties, if you delay, if you do this, if you do that. At the end, give and take, if you get a bit of crisis, if you're cash liquid, you may not feel it, but most businesses are not in Africa. If you get liquid currency, you can actually pay as high as 100% or 150% on the facility. And that's where Islamic banking comes in and makes it a bit more favorable to the client, makes it a bit. And there are also other models. For example, if you're into manufacturing or into farming or agriculture, there are products that are actually specifically for that. For example, in the agriculture side, there's a product that actually allows you to buy the input for the farmer and already buy out at a known price with the specifics his produce. So you pre-finance and you buy out and you sell. So the bank acts as an intermediary role here in this kind of economy. In an Islamic finance economy, the bank is just a mere intermediary. It's just a rail where things just intertwine and go into where it is most required. And what happens is, like, in manufacturing, for example, there are products that are called partnerships, mudaraba, or musharaka mutadagisa, which is like diminishing partnerships, whereby the bank goes in as a partner, equity partner. So this is not a debt, equity partner. And as equity partner, you have profit and loss sharing.
Yeah. So they're invested in the success.
Yes, of course. And you know what? When it's like this, also you're taking too much risk, so which means the involvement of the bank will be high. It will not be just get me some books and like in the beginning. This is how it happens in Africa, for example. The bank asks for some numbers. You go to the market, you go to certain CPA consultant somewhere, and you tell him, just cook for me the numbers. They cook the numbers for you. You take it to the bank. The bank looks at those numbers and gives you the facility according to those numbers. And the only thing they look at is the collateral. Okay, if he fails to pay, do I have a place to run to? That's it. But for us, Islamic finance, it is beyond that. It is looking at the impact of this initiative in the beginning and deciding where to put the money first, put it in projects that have the highest social impact. And once that happens, it is about partnerships, growing these companies in partnerships that are like more or less like diminishing partnerships, for example, because like many family-owned successful businesses in this region are a bit skeptical of having partnerships with anyone.
Right.
But for us, what we give is like diminishing partnerships. So I come in, I give you the scale you require, the capital you require, we grow together. You will be buying me out. So every year, I take my portion and a portion of what I'm selling to you. So my percentages keep reducing. If I had 40% stake, it keeps on reducing year on year. And for the fifth year, I have nothing. I've exited.
It feels like it's a logical community development model in terms of really empowering the business owner to not necessarily fear a total loss of its business because of these partnership models, and just knowing that it's a trusted resource that is more compatible with what is going on. And not to say that there are traditional banks that may not think that, but in the Western world, the idea of a traditional bank is not necessarily a partnership, even though they are invested because they want to get their interest on their returns. But aside from community banks that are focused on building wealth in a specific community, it seems like across the board, an institution that is formed on the concept of Islamic banking is at the fore, very much focused on making sure that community and economic development are the first impulse or the priority.
And also another priority that I would add here is sustainability.
Yes, exactly.
That's why the screening we do there are a lot of people who actually cook the whole file just to get the money out of the bank and never pay. So for us, we're taking too much risk anyhow. We can't allow such things to happen. So we do thorough studies and background checks. We do background checks from the community perspective. We look for where this person lives, his local chiefs, who knows him, who had a business with him. We do other research just to be sure that we're not falling into prey to someone that has the intention of not paying. It actually happens. And, sometimes it happens from people you are not expecting from. Very respected, strong, very rich, plus 1 billion plus worth kind of individuals are the ones who actually take from the banks with intention of never paying. It happens in this side of the continent. I don't know if it happens in Ghana.
It does.
So usually it's not even about like, oh, he got the money, he'll pay. No, some people actually just take it and look for a loophole. a strategy and look for a loophole not to pay you. For example, if you are syndicating with a sister institution, for example, in South Africa, of course, a facility is a facility. You've got to pay. It's not your money. But now they will be using a loophole in the law that actually says, okay, the money channeled through you, is it for you or it's for the South African entity? If it's for the South African entity, then South African entity doesn't have a legal way of doing business here. And now, there were many cases actually that this was taken to court even in Uganda here. It's one of the very big unlucky things that happen around here. But we try to cope with that. And for us, our intention is to empower youth. Africa is mostly made of youth. And when I say youth brings in the sustainability bit of it. Yeah. I mean, if I believe in certain values and I don't raise those values and I don't embed those values to my kids, it means that those values will not last longer than my life.
Yeah.
But if I have kids that take it up and then they take it up to their other kids and then it goes on, a bit of it will remain in the third or second or fourth generation. And that is what we look at here.
Yes.
When we see a bit of a glance on override of Islamic finance and the ESG goals, we see accountability, transparency, and legal protection for all parties is core. Promotion of equality, social justice, and economic prosperity in society and operations. Promotion of environmental protection and resource conservation. And this protection of environment, there's a verse in the Quran that says that don't corrupt the world after we have actually made this earth very peaceful and very sustainable. So it actually says that we have to be careful that our footprint and our actions don't bring hazard and devastation to this perfectly made for us to live in earth. When you look at it from that side, it's not about faith per se, but it's about equality, it's about justice. And in many cultures, I think we need to see this model beyond the eyes of certain cultures, maybe Middle Eastern cultures and all this.
Sure.
Because people actually confuse cultures and religion. Religion is also a subset of a culture, but it's very different. So for me, when I've actually researched on this and I've studied it and I've been involved in the last 10 years or so, it is actually something that you always have a room to learn. You always have an opportunity to learn. And me as a Muslim, actually, some of the things I'm just figuring out like way late in my life. And I think it's a model that people can actually look at and say, hey, does this actually work for us? And if it does, we try to solve our problems, common problems. And the beauty of it also, actually, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't say you can give so-and-so and take interest from Florence because she's not of the faith, but you can't give it to your brother, the same way other faiths that, in the beginning of Sherlock's and back in the days of the Rothschilds, there was a concept that there's a certain community that were not allowed to give to each other interest or each other, but they would actually charge on others. Here in Islamic, different. It is not allowed, it's not allowed. If you can't do something to someone, then you can't do something to someone despite their faith.
Right.
If you have a neighbor, despite the faith, that neighbor has rights, and you have to accord them whether you like them or not. And I we start with the finance bit. It works for us. It kind of protects. It's a protection kind of, Like for me right now, I have a watchdog, the government. The regulatory frameworks in place, Bank of Uganda. But on top of it, I share that with everyone else. But on top of that, I'm also subjected to Sharia board that looks at every bit I'm doing, so that I'm not just saying I'm doing Islamic product and it's not Islamic. They check. And all these checks are for the end customer, to protect the end customer's interests.
It's a great concept to explore and to expand. I like that idea. Thanks for joining us for part 1 of my conversation with Farhan Guled. Be sure to come back next week when the conversation continues with Farhan telling us more about his perspectives on sustainable growth and SDGs, as well as doing business in Africa, and a little bit about how he spends his leisure time. As always, you can catch us with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Please like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, leave us a review. You can leave up to a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube, and stay tuned for more content, more opportunities to network with local citizens, and just making the connections that I think have been really interesting to observe over the last few episodes between East Africa, agriculture, finance, and just really putting a lens on what it's going to take to really usher in and manifest a new world. So again, thanks for joining us. And until next time, bye for now.